Benny, another scary story, mate, or tell us like a special hunt. I'd love to hear some big fish stories.
Yeah, I was about to talk about some seamounts that I've bombed.
Oh yeah, sweet.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to do a couple of trips with the Back to Basics boys to Samoa, and that place is just next level. Like everyone in Samoa, if you spearfish, they think you're a crazy person, and they treat you as such, like in a good way. They think you're just like the craziest dude on the planet. They'd never jump in the ocean. So there's actually a lot of good fish around. The stuff that's close near the island has been fished to death. But then once you go a little bit wider, like we were diving on some mounds that the Samoan skipper was saying, I don't think anyone's ever jumped in on these before. Because they're like 70, 80 miles off, like mainland Samoa, whatever you can call it that. But yeah, it's literally in the middle of the ocean. And these things are coming up from like 1,600 meters to about 60. And we were... we were obviously hunting dogtooth, and we had a couple of boys out there that paid a fair bit of money to chase them. And yeah, for the first 4 or 5 days, we were just basically getting skunked. Like we could see the doggies on the top of the mound, the little white dots swimming around in 60 meters, and it just feels like you can swim down and get them. But you max out at 30, like 10 meters past a 20-meter flasher, and you're like, that's still another 30, 40 meters to go to get down the bottom. And as much as we tried, we just couldn't really get them up for the first couple of days. Like, we're getting good Spanish, get a couple good jobbies, and then every time we'd fail at that, we'd go pepper some reefs and just see like, buffalo emperor everywhere, schools of long nose. It was good to get a couple of elusive emperor species under the belt, but the seamounts are just something else. When you can see for like 150 meters in every direction, and you can see that there's like oceanic white tips over there just cruising and Spanios over there, it's a different level. And it took us about 5 or 6 days to actually land the big dogs, but the day that it turned on. Everyone got a sick fish. The boys that paid money both got 40 plus kilos, I think, 30, 40 kilo dogs. And those are some serious teamwork. Like, I don't know if you've ever tried to swim a 3-atmosphere float down underwater yourself. You literally struggle to bob the thing under the water. You shoot a 40 kilo dogtooth, it'll rip 3 of them to the depths that you can't even see them anymore. And I remember the first one that we shot, I was filming. I was getting paid to film there, so I was filming the boys, and I filmed the shot, and I was right next to the floats as they got ripped down on the first big one. First shot, obviously no time for a second. The boys didn't really tell me the game plan. So I've witnessed these 3 atmosphere floats, so 9 atmospheres just getting ripped towards the depths by this 40 kilo fish, and I was freaking out. Like, I grabbed onto the last one and I started getting ripped down towards the death, and I'm looking up at the boys and they're all like waving across their necks, being like, what? No. And I'm like, I'm trying, we're going to lose it. And I pop back up the surface and they're like, why'd you let go, bro? You lost the fish. And I was like, really? I thought I was about to drown. They were like, you were definitely about to drown. That was the dumbest thing we've ever seen. And I was like, shit, what? And they're like, look, we're all going to get back in the boat now, and those floats are going to pop up somewhere. Then we jump back in and we fight the fish then, after it's all tired and shit. I was like, whew. They're like, Benny, your 70 kilos are nothing, brother. You're not going to stop that. And I was like, shit. And then just like the next level of then the boys all getting on the float line and taking time to rip this thing up and keeping it off the sharks, and 2 dudes diving down, warding sharks off, another guy putting a second shot in, bringing the first one in the boat was literally the loudest I've heard 5 dudes ever cheer ever. And yeah, and then it just turned on, and then we got 2 and then 3, and then the Back to Basics boys both got another good one. So, yeah, it was just...
It ended up being a sick trip.
It ended up being a sick trip, and we ended up back on the dock with all the Samoans, and they're waving all the big dog tooths around. We were like king of the village for a night or 2. Yeah, the chief got everyone to come around, and we cooked up a huge feed, but that's diving.
About the surgeon.
Oh, yeah, so like the day before, right, so they knew that we were like filming, fishing, and like we got a bunch of good species to them, but each day on the dock, there'd be more and more Samoans ready for like, to get a feed off us. And by the 5th day, the day before we got the big dogs, there was like half the village down there. And we were like, to Tua, the captain was like, how funny would it be if we just tell them we got 1 fish and watch them share? And I was like, oh, how about that surgeon we've had kicking around the bilge for like 6 hours? So I was at the front and I was like, oh, this is the only fish we got. And they're all kind of like, awesome. And we're like, what? And then we gave it to them. We were like, oh, no, we're joking. And before we could even show them the other fish, they've started ripping it apart and just eating the dog raw straight off the jetty. And we were like, oh, that's been in the petrol bilge for like fucking 8 hours. And we're trying to get it back, and they wouldn't let us get it back off them. And then like we were showing them all these other fish, and they were like, wait, just to finish their surgeon first before they'd received like the trout and the long nose and the dog tooth. But actually, we didn't have doggies that day, but yeah, surgeons, man, they love them. And tiny coral trout. The smaller the better, they reckon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, there's one time we're drifting, and the skipper, he was fishing the whole time. He was awesome. He's actually an ex-priest,
Yeah, right.
which makes the next sentence a bit weird. So he caught the smallest coral trout I've ever seen caught on a hook. And as we were on the boat, and we were like, oh, you're going to chuck that back? He's like, no. This is the best. And we were like, mate, that thing was born yesterday. And he was like, yeah, born to die. And then we chucked it back, and he was off us for the rest of the day. He was like, you need to go get me one that size. And we're like, we're not shooting a trout that small. Yeah. And he didn't get one for the rest of the day, and he was off us. He didn't even sit with us for dinner. He went and sat with the rest of the local boys at the little Farlow.
Sometimes, like you see it with different people, like they don't have that same idea of like, hey, we'll let a fish get to a certain size because it's had a chance to breed. It's kind of like they just know what they like to eat, and yeah.
If it's yum, they'll bang it. But yeah, Ross,
QA.
yeah, kind of like facts. Say less.
Your brother got you there, Benny. Clean. He got you.